Hello, it's Pastor Donald here at Richland Hills Baptist Church. Now, just a little while ago, I was sitting in here in the sanctuary, just spending a few moments of quiet and reflection. Each day we have chimes or bells that go off, and at noon it's an extended period of time. Now I was just listening to the bells and again praying and just spending a few minutes here in the sanctuary. As I did, I began to look around, and I love our sanctuary. It's beautiful. I love the stained glass. There's a grandness to this sanctuary that I've always loved. But as I began to look around, I began to just imagine. I began to look at the pews, and I began to imagine the ways that people have been impacted through the ministries of Richland Hills Baptist Church throughout the ages. I thought about the small children that have grown up here, that are now older themselves. Perhaps they have children or grandchildren of their own. I began to think of the men and women who heard the gospel of Jesus Christ and were saved right here in this church or through the ministries of this church. I think about the children who were part of a bus ministry that we had years ago, and children, and perhaps they heard the gospel of Jesus Christ through the bus ministries. And I began to think about the children that might have flooded these pews. Maybe some didn't have their parents with them, but they heard the good news of Jesus. I thought about men who are struggling in different areas of their life, and they came here seeking Christ, and they found Him. I thought about women with children and seeking companionship and friendship, and perhaps they found that here in the walls of Richland Hills Baptist Church. I began to think about the reality that and it's true that there were young men and women who had heard the call of Jesus Christ and have served Him in some sort of ministry. I think about the men who have heard the call to pastor, and we have men who have grown up in this church who are now preachers of the gospel, missionaries, servants of the Lord. That's a powerful thought. It's a powerful thought that this church, this local church of Richland Hills Baptist, has impacted the community and the world. I think about the reality that there have been wonderful preachers that have stood behind the pulpit and have preached the gospel of Jesus Christ boldly and with just great boldness and without shame. Preachers that have led people to know Christ and to follow Him. So just thinking about the legacy of Richland Hills Baptist Church, a beautiful legacy of spreading the gospel, a legacy that won't stop, a legacy that's still going. Even in these times, our desires that the gospel would be preached and the gospel would be spread. But I'd love to know more about the legacy of Richland Hills Baptist. I know a lot about it. Being the pastor here, I've heard quite a bit. But I'd like for you to do something. If you're watching this, two things. Would you share, perhaps in the comments, of how the ministries of Richland Hills Baptist Church have impacted your life? Just make a comment. Let us know. I would love to hear about how that has happened. If you're a member here, that's wonderful. Share that. But this is true even if you're not a member of this church. Maybe you grew up here, maybe you've moved away, or maybe you're part of another church. I would love to still hear about how this church has impacted your life. I'd love to hear stories of how you heard the gospel here, or maybe you were called into ministry, or however, or maybe just the way that you learned how to be a faithful Christian here at this church. Maybe hear about ways that you've heard the Bible taught. You grew in your faith through strong Bible teaching here. But the second thing I'd like for you to do is I'd love for you to share this video. Share it on your social media. And share it with people that you knew have grown up here or have been saved here, impacted here. And I would love for them to be able to share their stories. I would love for anybody who's been impacted by this church to share a story of how God has used this church in your life. So share this so that others can have the opportunity. But I would love to hear from as many people as possible and be encouraged that the ministry of this church, the legacy of this church is powerful and strong. But also to know that this legacy is still continuing today. Richland Hills Baptist Church is still a church that preaches and believes the gospel of Jesus Christ. A church that believes that the gospel changes lives every day. A church that believes in spreading the gospel around us. So I'd love for you to do those things. Share how God has used this church in your life, and share this with others so that they can also recount their experiences. I love this church. I love the building. But one thing we've learned, we've always known this, but we've learned more than ever that the church isn't a building, is it? It's a people. And so I'm so grateful for this people here at Richland Hills Baptist. And I love each and every one of you. I would love to hear about how God has used this body in your life. Have a great day.